This is the story I know and also not the story I know.
How can a mother put a baby in a basket and throw them into a river?
I look at this and I see this very complicated dynamic. Where am I from? Where is home?
You feel he's ready for a fall. It's like when you open a door and you don't know what's going to be behind.
I was born in Iraq, in Baghdad. My father passed away when I was 2 years old, and our mother looked after us from childhood. Growing up in there, it was fun. We used to play on the street all the time with the neighbors' kids. When I started going to primary school, it was then when the war started between Iraq and Iran. Instead of singing songs and hymns, we used to have raising the flag, and we had a soldier shooting with the AK-47 just to make the children get used to the sound of bullets and sound of bombs. We used to see every other day coffins of soldiers that were killed in the war coming from in our neighborhood. So when my older brother became closer to an age where he has to do his documents and register for the army, my mother, she do whatever she can just to save her children. She sat down with us and she told us how it is going to be that we are leaving. Bible story tells us that a time came when the Pharaoh gave an order for every son born to the Hebrews to be executed. The story of Moses comes when his mother, out of her fear for the safety of her son, she puts him in a basket and puts him down the River Nile. The biggest thing that I get out of this picture is the mother's love. But putting him in a basket and in a river, at least maybe she thought, even far from me, as long as he lives, is okay. And it resonates with my mother's decision to take us out. There were rumors of many families trying to flee Iraq, and they were persecuted and executed for that. She decided, yes, no matter what difficulties we're going to face, going out, we'll face it together. I'll try my best to save my children, because I know here if we stay, they will die. 6 days the journey took. It was moving across mountains. We arrived at the Iranian border. It was a very brave decision. It's heroic. It was the story in the 1700s, and it is the story today as well. You see how desperate parents are when they're putting a child into a dinghy and sending them away. Nothing changes in it. We're still the same people. We dress differently. We do our hairstyles differently, but we're the same people. The story has lived 3,000 years, and it will live forever, I believe.
You can't overstate how important this narrative is within the Jewish tradition. This child is saved, and by that twist of biblical fate, saved by Pharaoh's daughter. Of course, we all know that Moses will grow up to become the leader of the Israelites and go back and defeat Pharaoh. This is the story I know and also not the story I know. I think when I first stood in front of it in the National Gallery, it didn't feel necessarily like my imagination. If I were going to paint the scene, it's not what I would do. These women are dressed in finest silk brocades. They're very, very white. This is not a scene that's taking place in ancient Egypt with those people. It's a scene that has been interpreted and transplanted into English history. And we know, of course, that this painting was commissioned by Charles I to hang in Greenwich, and in fact at least one of the women, the one with a bit of this beautiful purpley going into blue silk, has her hand outstretched and pointing towards what would have been the Thames. So we've got this story that's really absolutely foundational and core to the development of Jewish theology and to our whole kind of core historical narrative, who we are, and it's been co-opted for an entirely different purpose. It speaks in this painting probably to the kings and queens of England and their royal heritage, and of course that's not really what the biblical story is about at all. It's about a downtrodden, enslaved people who will be led out of slavery by this young baby, Moses, who's been hand-chosen by God. On the other hand, the narratives of the Hebrew Bible have been read by other peoples in other contexts for millennia. And even within the Jewish tradition, we often reinterpret and interpret again our core narrative. So in that sense, it's perfectly comprehensible as well, and can then, in that sort of sense, become a focal point for dialogue as well between different faith communities.
The Foundling Hospital was established in 1739 by royal charter, and it was a charity that cared for, raised and educated babies who would otherwise have been abandoned on the streets of London. For families in poverty who could not care for their children, there was no system for them to find an alternative other than to leave their babies on doorsteps of churches or wealthy houses, or in some cases rubbish heaps. Moses was critical for the Foundling Hospital. The Foundling Museum has two large works giving the Moses story. There was a significant proportion of society who believed that a foundling hospital was not the right thing to do, that providing women, mothers who were in a desperate situation with somewhere to bring their babies, that this was in fact rewarding sexual license or promoting promiscuity. Moses was the ultimate counter-argument. He was the original foundling, he sits at the heart of the Christian message, and that he was the proof, the ultimate proof, that in fact a foundling hospital, that taking in of a baby in peril, had deep Christian roots and was the right and moral thing to do. I look at this from my perspective of working at the Foundling Museum and working with young people who've grown up in care, and I see this very complicated dynamic with this child in the middle who will grow up, I think, to experience what a lot of children who've grown up in care do is where am I from? Who is my family? Where is home? I mean, it's interesting how many characters in fiction that, you know, they have lost their birth parents. That sense of feeling of not being fully part of the whole, being slightly on the margins, looking in. But it gives them an agency and it gives them a position on the outside to see what's going on with a kind of clarity that very often people within the heart of the society cannot see. I think when you look at Moses and that persistence, that level of resilience, that keeping going, that in the face of overwhelming odds, 40 years, to keep going, I see in that resilience and that strength, that trace of care experience there, that he has grown up knowing that it's down to him.
My work always starts with the landscape, a place where there was an incident or a violent event. Trying to look how violence can sometimes disseminate into the environment. Our actions and nature, how these two are so tied together and how one just echoes the other. Moses in Arabic is Musa, Nabi Musa, and one of the explanation of the name of Musa is it's Mu, which is water, and Sha is trees, so because he was found between the trees in the river. And I find this quite beautiful as a metaphor. Moses is saved actually from the water for a new life, for a new possibility of a life. The soft water that carries and protects, but also the water that kills the Egyptians when they were walking behind them when the sea closes again. It can take all shapes and forms, being violent and being tender. And I think it speaks a lot also of human nature, not just being good or bad or, like a one-faceted. It's, I think, speaks of the complexity of the human being. What really strikes me the most about this painting is this empty triangle that is beneath him, this like black hole that is under the cradle of Moses, where you feel he's ready for a fall. It's very different from all the colorful, lush drapery of the women that are surrounding Moses. He's being saved, but what his story or his life is gonna become, I mean, you could see that he's not saved. I mean, he's destined to kill someone. The composition of this picture draws Moses as if he's not there. I mean, no one sees him, no one is looking at him, although he's like really in the center of the picture. I think he's a lonely character because he inhabits this border space, this space of in-between, of transition. It's not about crossing a border, but he is living the border. He is the passage from one place to the other without ever reaching the beginning or the end.